Ladies and gentlemen, take out your protractors, set your scale rules to 3/4 of an inch, and remember that everything you build will crumble to dust.
Because it's time to talk Tull to me. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Talk Tull to Me. I am Nick McGill.
And I am Omen Sade.
And we are Feckless Momes.
And this is Talk Tull to Me, a blueprint where we reverse engineer every Tull album one song at a time.
I definitely thought you had more on that.
I thought I did too.
We will take the disparate pieces from a variety of albums and put together a bizarre-looking piece of architecture that most people would think is hideous, but we love deep down in our hearts.
From the cottage crafts aesthetic of stand-up through the Spanish brutalism of the late 80s, every song a style, every album a house, every house a disaster.
What that all means is we're going to be talking Tull to you.
Exactly.
And this week, before we get into things, we've got a little more thick as a brick errata, a little thick as a brick lore for you.
Yeah.
And this is a quote from Ian Anderson about the character that is Gerald Bostock. And this is from that really awesome Jethro Tull prog rock magazine that I have. And it's a direct quote. I'll give it to you here. Yes, there's an autobiographical element in what I wrote. As a child, I was a bit of a rebel. Surprise. Most of my peers aspired to going to grammar school, getting 8 O levels and 3 A levels, and a couple of owls, I imagine, in there. Any newts?
Yeah, right after the newt.
Then becoming part of conventional society. That never appealed to me. I was the sort of child who loved spending time collecting pond life and then analyzing it. I also loved science fiction stories of the era, the 1950s, because they told of a different, exciting future. So I stood apart from others of my age and drew on this for the character of Gerald Bostock. But he himself is a fiction. Now, Omen.
Yeah, Nick.
That is very important.
It is. And that's what Ian Anderson has always said.
Yep.
We're going to come back to the fact that he analyzed pond life later.
Songs from the Pond, my favorite album.
Songs from the Pond, yes.
So yes, Ian Anderson has made the claim over the 30, 40 years now of Thick as a Brick, that Gerald Bostock is a completely fictional character.
Right, made up out of the head of Ian Anderson to work as a mouthpiece for himself, a mask of himself, as it were, so he could further hide his intentions and layer the joke of the album Thick as a Brick.
Right, yeah. It really helps to cement it's just an added element of the concept.
And so for almost 50 years, everyone has accepted the fact that Gerald Bostock is a fictional character. However, Nick, we have received an email that disputes that claim.
This is 100% fact. We are not being facetious here. We do have an email. We're not going to talk about it just yet because there is a lot of investigation to do.
We don't want to present you with any information that is spurious or misleading or poorly researched. And so we're going to do our due diligence. But needless to say, we have what could be some pretty hot goss.
I'm pretty excited about that. So hopefully we'll get back to you relatively soon. And until then, why don't we just jump right into the next track off of Thick as a Brick?
What is the quote-unquote title of this section?
This is the next 5.5 minutes. So it is, let's see, it's 10.5 minutes in so far. The next 5.5 minutes, we have What Do You Do When the Old Man's Gone? And From the Upper Class.
This portion of Talk Tull to Me is brought to you by Daddy Issues.
I forgot about that, yeah.
Let's have a listen.
Yep.
What do you do when the old man's gone? Do you want to be him?
Banana, banana.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, breaking it up into tracks it's a little jarring when it ends because we know what's coming up.
It is, and because it is all one track, it feels unresolved.
Yes. Yeah, it really does. Yeah.
I find that I have to take a couple seconds to breathe after we stop each of these sections.
Yeah, because your mind is already moving on to the next part.
Yeah.
But the next part isn't there.
Not till next week.
So not until next week. Give us a review, and we'll see you then. So thoughts on Daddy Issues 101 here.
Goodness me, Nick. They are ever so thick and tasty.
Let's start musically first before we get into the meaty contents.
Let's, Nick, talk about the Hammond organ.
Oh, it's so prominent in this. It's really nice.
It's working overtime.
Yeah.
John Evan is really, really earning his keep here. And, we've talked before about how much influence he had on the album. And, this is a great section to showcase really, really what that means and what that looks like.
Yeah, it carries so much on its back as a through line throughout really the whole album. But we hear it really, this is a great example. It's just, it's percussive, it's charging, it's chugging forward, it's keeping the movement going.
And he's using the superpower of the Hammond organ by switching back and forth between those different sounds. Mm-hmm. Almost mid phrase, and producing these wonderful contrasts.
Yeah. Well, that's the beauty of the organ in general, and that's really proof of someone who knows what the heck they're doing with an organ, like who can really take advantage of it. The organ was essentially like a proto-keyboard, really. The ability to manipulate and tweak where the sound is coming from and the amount of air and things like that. Like it's really cool.
Do you want to hear a little bit about the organ?
Oh, sure. Yeah, that could help us put it into perspective a little bit.
I'm just going to read from the Wikipedia page. The Hammond organ,
the Jeffrey Hammond organ,
is an electric organ invented by Lawrence Hammond and John M. Harnett. Notice it wasn't called the Harnett organ.
Yeah.
And first manufactured in 1935. Various models have been produced, most of which use sliding drawbars to vary sounds. Until 1975, Hammond organs generated sound by creating an electric current from a rotating metal tone wheel near an electromagnetic pickup, and then strengthening the signal with an amplifier to drive a speaker cabinet. Nick, I don't really even know all the things that I just said. So it started as a low-cost alternative to the wind-driven pipe album.
Pipe album?
Pipe organ.
My favorite Tull album.
It started as a low-cost alternative to the wind-driven pipe organ.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Because you can fit a whole heck of a lot more in electronics into a smaller space as opposed to something that requires bellows and air moving through specific sized parts.
Right,
and
there
are
fewer moving parts. Even though there are moving parts, there are a lot fewer of them.
Yeah. Yeah, both physically and more metaphorically.
Yeah. The Hammond organ's technology derives from the teleharmonium, an instrument created in 1897,
Wow.
the year that Ian Anderson was born,
Yep.
by Thaddeus Cadhill. The teleharmonium used revolving electric alternators which generated tones that could be transmitted over wires. The instrument was bulky enough to require several railway cars for its transportation.
Holy cow.
Because the alternators had to be large enough to generate high voltage for loud enough signal.
Yeah.
The Hammond organ solved this problem by using an amplifier.
Huh. Okay. So they took the creation of the signal portion of the original and just hooked it up to an amp.
Yeah, they just plugged it in.
Yeah. That's cool. That's really cool. So now it
Yeah.
only needs 3 train cars instead of...
Yeah, they're like, oh, is that the circus coming to town? No, it's Jethro Tull,
Jethro
and that's
Tull.
their organ.
Yeah.
The first 2 train cars are for the organ. The next 7 are for Ian Anderson's ego.
And the last one is the rest of the band.
And yes, the last one is the lion cage is where the bassist lives until they let him out.
So yes, very, very organ heavy, but also something I noticed for the first time in listening to this track is there are some really killer drum fills in here that I haven't
There
noticed
really
before.
are.
It's great.
Some lovely, delicate things, too.
It's not your Bunkernian drum solo, but it's also more than just like I'm keeping time, so tom, snare, bass.
No,
tom.
it's really
Yeah.
it's really intelligent.
Barrymore Barlow is starting to prove that he has some nuance and some technique here that's really nice. Not that
Yeah.
Clive didn't,
No,
But-
this is Barry less is more Barlow.
but oh gosh, but Clive, we did not come up with the bunker bash phrase just for giggles. Like there was a seed of truth there,
Right.
and this is nice. Barrymore has a little more finesse to it,
Is it because he had 7 fingers on each hand, Nick?
and a pair of hands on each knee, so we can hold extra.
That really helps.
It does.
Extra sticks.
Yep.
So, Nick, now we've sort of talked about the instrumentation in one way or another. Let's talk about what the instruments are really doing. So there's this running theme of this English air that's being repeated and set up against other things, but it's a theme throughout this entire 5 minutes. The sort of doom doom doo 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 doo
Yeah.
doo 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 doom doom. And then, the flute kind of riffs off of that.
Yeah. But it's also, I want to tie back to what our nemesis Ben Gerson said, that there's that chugging, that like marching. He said there's kind of like a marching feel to it.
There is.
And that really helps that. And I think that's kind of what he was getting at, is that's what that sound kind of feels to me, is it's just gradually, it's just moving, it's pushing along on this song.
And going back to what we were talking about last episode with the notion of duality and opposite, which is a theme throughout.
Yeah.
This is a good example of how that's being done musically, where you have that driving, not necessarily military, but military adjacent march going on, and then contrasting that with the more delicate, less regimented English country, almost folk song feel. And sometimes those are playing at the same time, sometimes they're jumping back and forth between the two of them, but they're always being presented in contrast. And I think that pull between these two very disparate styles and ideas is really the musical theme of the entire album.
Yeah. Yeah, musically and lyrically, there is enough variety of these general ideas that it doesn't get old and overplayed.
No.
And I'm thinking that marching feeling, that kind of chugging along, that's probably a very effective way to keep the ear even subconsciously connected to this song, because a 45-minute track, it's very easy to fade
Kind of
out.
tune out, yeah.
Yeah, but that little bit can kind of just tie you in and just keep you going.
Well, and in the same vein, it's not just the same themes being repeated, but even
Right.
even within them, they will distort them. I mean, that's sort of what the brilliant usage of the Hammond organ by John Evan allows him to distort a phrase, either mid-phrase or play it once normal and then play it once distorted, so that the ear has to work harder to be like, oh wait, I recognize that, I know what that is, but now it sounds slightly different, and so it keeps your interest going.
Yeah, it's not ambient music. It's not designed
No.
with constant repetition, so you can kind of fade out. Like the goal, I'm assuming the goal was to keep the listener, and the challenge too. What a cool challenge to face is, I have 45 minutes to do a concept album on this one side of this album. Let's keep them. Let's hook them as long as possible.
Hook them and play them until they're so tired that you can just reel them in at the end.
Yeah. And then the last thing I want to talk about musically,
Yes.
is going back to that organ that you were talking about, that dun, 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 and that transition between the two kind of portions of this song. I really love how brash that transition is. It chugs along and then it stops, and it seems like it's going to transition into a new piece.
Right.
And then it jarringly falls back to that organ, that dun 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 dun, dun, and they bounce back and forth like 2 or 3 times.
Let's actually have a listen to one of those moments right now, Nick.
Yeah, I'll drop that chunk in right here.
Ooh, how delightful. We just heard it.
It dropped in, chunked in. I really like that. It's not, it kind of wakes you up for the last quarter of this side of the album to really throw the transition into your face, as opposed to being like, and we are still going.
The other big contrast that this section moves back and forth between is the instrumental section and the lyrical section. And there are some lovely drum pickups throughout to kind of cue you to get ready for lyrics. There's that kind of it's almost like in Shakespeare where certain rhythms are used to alert the ear that a transition is happening, like a rhyming couplet at the end of a scene.
Yeah, whether you consciously know it and can like academically recognize it, it still does something in the ear that kind of notifies you, to let you know something new is happening. There's a change coming up.
Human beings are very rhythmically aware.
Yeah.
Except for white people, but still, a little joke. But no, you're totally right, and infants can recognize the difference between different kinds of rhythms, before they can speak.
Yeah, it is an inherent thing which makes music and musicality so fascinating on an artistic but also a scientific level.
Yeah, it's primal. There's something primal about it. And that's
it's the original language.
It is, and that's why I think we love Jethro Tull so much, Nick, because it combines the primal driving rhythms with the highly intellectual, upper-level thinking that Ian Anderson brings to the table.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I like that. I think we solved Jethro Tull.
We did. Goodbye, everyone. Good night. So speaking of Mr. Anderson, speaking of daddy issues, let's move into the lyrics.
Yeah. So there in this portion, there's not a whole lot lyrically, but there is certainly enough.
There's There's enough to keep us occupied, yes.
Yeah.
What do you do when the old man's gone? Do you wanna be him? And your real self sing a song. Do you wanna free him?
What do you do when the old man's gone? Do you want to be him?
Ooh, boy. Let's just unpack that, Nick, shall we?
Well, classically, your old man is generally a term referring to your father,
Oh, certainly,
I'm
yes.
assuming.
And, just that line alone really, I think, sums up a huge percentage of... Sorry, can you hear Tiki?
I did hear, yeah.
That line alone sums up a huge quantity of, like, Western literature and Western psychology.
Becoming your father, whether you want to or not.
Absolutely. What do you do?
Yeah. If you don't want to, you inevitably do, and if you do want to, you inevitably fail.
Right. I mean, look at Hamlet.
Yeah.
What do you... I mean, that line could summarize the entire play of Hamlet. What do you do when the old man's gone?
Yeah.
Do you want to be him?
or
Let's
Oedipus,
talk about
too.
it for 3 hours.
Yeah.
Right. Oh my gosh, yeah, Oedipus.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's a question which has fundamentally haunted writers ever since the invention of written language.
Yeah.
And Nick, do we think that at the time of the writing or the recording of this album that Ian Anderson's father had in fact died? Because we've had several songs sort of leading up to it.
I know. I don't think so. I think he survived a bit longer.
He survived thick as a brick?
He may have, yeah. We might not, but his father did, I think.
Well, whether or not the president of the Boiler Fluid Company was in fact alive at this time, I think that Ian is clearly grappling with the inevitable, the death
Yeah.
of his father.
Right. And what he is making of his life and has made of his life up to this point.
Right, and I think that the issue with that question is whether or not you want to, quote unquote, be the old man. There is both and simultaneously the inevitability that you will take the place of the father figure, and the certainty that however you do it, you will have to do it in your own way because you ultimately can only ever be yourself. It's just like in the film Mulan. When Mulan takes the place of her father because he's too old to go to war, but she does it in her own special way, and that's why it's a brilliant film.
Yes, that.
Ian is realizing that he must be swift as the coursing river.
Just around the Riverbend.
Well, that's the different movie.
You must be swift as the coursing river.
Waiting just around the river bend.
And I think it also ties in with the next line. And your real self sings the song, Do You Want to Free Him? Again, this is tying back to the poet and the soldier.
Yes, exactly. And the youngest of the family versus the oldest.
Yeah, do you replace your dad and take over the Boiler Fluid Company, or do you go into a rock band?
Do you be your real self?
Yeah.
That's the choice. It's like, do you present this sort of socially acceptable but false outward image, or do you painfully become the iconoclast that you know you are?
Right. Which was far more of a daunting choice at that time.
Yeah.
Like, we have it easy. We can be, I mean, you and I are podcasting right now.
We are podcasting beyond our father's wildest dreams.
Or their wishes for the family.
Gone way further than they would like us to. Well, and that struggle comes in the next two lines. No one to help you get upstream, and the whirlpool turns you way off beam. Now Nick, here we have a lovely antiquated phrase, off beam. Do you have an idea what it means?
I have an idea.
Would you like to know the origin?
I want you to actually tell me. But before we do that, you said
Yes.
no one to help you get upstream.
Yeah.
The lyrics I'm looking at say get up steam.
Oh, it does say steam. I
But
just read it wrong.
Stream makes sense in the terms that this couplet is a water metaphor. Right?
But actually, steam makes more sense. And now I will reveal to you the origin of the phrase off beam.
Okay, good.
All right. Off beam refers to an early 20th century form of navigation for both steamer ships and then slightly later for airplanes.
Okay.
A port city or an air base would broadcast a thin radio signal. So like a locally confined small beam, literally a beam of radio signals that would shoot out in a very specific direction. And so as the vessel, you could know, even if you had nothing else, because there was no GPS, you couldn't really tell where you were
Right.
easily unless you wanted to get out your sextant and your astrolabe. But what if it's cloudy? So you would use this beam.
Everyone stop. Just think about it. What if it's cloudy?
What if it's cloudy? So you would just turn on your receiver and you would know, are you on course? If you can hear the beam, if you register the beam, then you are on course. If you are off beam, you're off course, and you have to figure it out. So being on beam or off beam is being on the right track or not on the right track.
And beam in the sense that think about if you listen to a radio station and you're listening to 90.5, you can generally twist the dial a little bit and go up to 90.7 or down to 90.3 and still hear bits and pieces of that radio station. A tight beam is going to be 90.5, and if you stray off of that at all, you're not going to hear anything.
Well, and this was actually physically straying off.
Or receive anything. Yeah, well, exactly. But I'm just trying to put into a context what a tight beam in the sense of
I got you.
Of a radio signal would be.
Right. But it was also they had a way of making it only broadcast in one direction.
Like physically sent out.
Like a beam of light.
Yeah, so a very tight, specific transmitter of a radio signal, as opposed to a full dish, which is a broader device.
Exactly. So you could only hear it if you were going in the right direction, sort of on this little, like imagine shining a flashlight.
Right.
Or
a laser versus a flashlight. Yeah.
Let's all think about lasers for a moment.
If everybody in the world thought about lasers for just 2 seconds, what do you think would happen? We'd waste
probably
2 seconds.
I've come down from the upper class to mend your rotten ways.
Nope. I want to go back to no one to help you get up steam.
Okay. Oh, because it's the shipping metaphor, because it's a steamship. And so, what?
What is boiler fluid? Fluid for a boiler, and a boiler creates steam.
Well, yes.
Yeah. What?
Yeah.
I thought you would be way more impressed.
I think that
I never know what to expect from you, Aman.
That's how I like it.
20 years of friendship. 20?
I love where you're going with it, because I would have never made the connection between those two kinds of boilers. But I think that there's a fundamental difference in that the boiler fluid is the kind of stuff that you would pump through radiators to heat a house, whereas the boiler on a ship, which makes steam, doesn't recycle the fluid.
But there's still steam connected to both of those things.
There, maybe.
Radiators are steam.
Or are they boiler fluid? I mean, what is boiler fluid, Nick?
Well, they put off steam. That's what a radiator does. And that's how it heats. It's not just around the area. It'll also put steam.
Well, then what's the fluid?
That's the bulk of what goes through the coils, I think.
Tune in to our other podcast,
My God.
Banter Boiler Fluid, to me,
We really need to figure that out.
where we talk about different kinds of boilers. You know, I have a friend who makes boilers.
Really?
Yeah, in upstate New York. Maybe I'll ask him.
A boiler is a closed vessel in which fluid, generally water, is heated. The fluid does not necessarily boil. The heated or vaporized fluid exits the boiler for use in various processes or heating applications, including water heating, central heating, boiler-based power generation, cooking and sanitation. We need to have your friend on the show.
Yeah, I think we do. In the meantime,
Yeah.
Nick, I think that you bring up a very good point, which is there is a steam to boiler jump that I think is for those such as you who have subtle minds recognizable. So subtle, sometimes you wonder.
Don't try and flatter me. You've already ruined it.
So right, no one to help you get up steam.
Yeah.
Interesting, Nick, because your daddy has abandoned you.
And left you with the boiler fluid industry.
Left you
Business
with the
that
boiler
he's grown.
fluid company,
Yep.
but instead you're going to start a rock and roll band.
That's right. And disappoint everyone.
So, Nick, now that we've spent 30 minutes on that stanza,
On
should we
boiler
move on to
fluids.
the next one?
Yeah, let's wrap this up. Wrap up this stanza here.
I've come down from the upper class to mend your rotten ways. My father was a man of power whom everyone obeyed. Now, Nick, before we can go any further, I have to point out that usage of the word whom is used by grammar Nazis. Sorry, by grammar aficionados
Thank you.
across the world to talk about the correct usage of the word whom.
Oh, that line is used as evidence of the proper use of whom?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Because it would be easy to say my father was a man of power who everyone obeyed. But that would be,
Well, yeah.
that would imply that he obeyed everyone.
Who?
Whereas saying whom everyone obeyed means that everyone around him obeyed him.
My father was a man of power who... Oh, shouldn't it be who obeyed everyone? I don't see
You
how
could also-
changing the who and whom changes the meaning.
Because if you say who everyone,
Oh, it would need a comma there, yeah, but
but it still makes sense.
but yeah, I get it. I get it. Yeah, okay, I get it. I appreciate that. I don't think if this were not Gerald Bostock writing this, we wouldn't have seen that whom.
Oh, you think?
I do think. I can't think
Therefore
of
you
another
are.
time. I do not think, therefore I am not.
I amped.
Non cogito ergo non sum?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or
I think
non cogito ergo poof.
ergo. I don't. I think that is an affectation for this character. I do.
I think it's just proper grammar.
I mean, it is also that, but there's nothing.
Tune into our other podcast, Gabble Grammar to me.
Gabble.
Yeah.
My goodness.
At any rate, grammar aside, we are talking about a powerful father figure.
Mm-hmm. It's there sounds like there is a degree of respect / almost fear there, even if it's not present fear, like he was an intimidating figure as while Gerald was a child.
Yeah. And so the effect of him lingers on.
Yes. Yeah, that is the overall underlying theme or flavor of the father, even if their relationship had changed or gotten better or what have you later on in life, there will
flavor of the
always
father.
be the flavor of it's my favorite Ben and Jerry's.
Well, right. And then, speaking of that the effects of time, we have that in the next couple of lines. So come on, all you criminals, I've got to put you straight, just like I did with my old man 20 years too late. Wow, what a history is revealed to us in such a small number of words, Nick.
It's for being under the guise of Gerald Bostock. This feels like very therapeutic and cathartic. And this is all presumption. I mean, we generally don't know a whole lot of the relationship that he had with his father, but based on a lot of the music, those bits and pieces that we've seen so far in
reading between the lines,
5 albums, this is, I mean, it's unless he's that good and he's just writing these songs for the sake of writing songs.
I mean, I think that when you write as much as Ian Anderson was writing during these days, everyone's different, right? But I think that in my experience of writing, there is when you do it a lot, there's a kind of a stream of consciousness that overtakes where it becomes automatic. And so you're just writing and you're not necessarily, and the better a writer you are, the less you filter yourself.
Right. And it's easier to pull even subconsciously from what you know than it is to create from whole cloth.
Absolutely. Well, and as Hemingway said, write drunk, edit sober, by which
This
he
gun
meant.
tastes funny.
What's that?
This gun tastes funny. Too soon. Or just crass and disrespectful.
Right.
So, write drunk, edit sober.
Right, by which he meant write drunk, edit drunk, move to the Key West, continue to be drunk.
You made this exact same joke.
Drunk.
Gosh, I don't even know.
It's an oldie but a goodie, Nick.
I think it was that long ago. So about a year old. This joke is a year old at least, Omen.
Obviously, Ian Anderson wasn't writing drunk, I think, because he's notorious for his sobriety.
Yep. Among several other things, he is notorious for his sobriety.
Right. But the concept, I think, fits in our supposition that his writing process is under the theory that we're working with is one of just prolific, getting it onto the page and then figuring it out later. And I think that is, when you do that, that reveals the person.
Yeah, because when you come up with something so good, even if it is on the more personal side, you don't want to edit it too much. You don't want to really take away from the underlying thesis because that will ruin what you've written.
Right.
It over editing will directly cancel out that unhindered flow.
Right. And all the great writers reveal things about themselves intentionally or not.
Yeah.
Edgar Allan Poe,
Loved birds.
Shakespeare, Oscar Wilde.
Loved men.
The only writer who really, as far as I know, was able to completely hide any sense of their own personality was Bach.
I've never read any of his works.
It's pretty boring to read. It's just EABBBADAG.
A couple C's
F.
in there.
A couple C's, maybe a
Yep.
flat. Whew, Nick. So, what else do we want to say about this part of the track?
I like it. It's having so little lyrically as we're doing this in chunks, like we said. We're kind of looking at it very boiled down, boiler fluided down, and this is this is a concentrated version of this chunk of the song. So of course we're going to be focusing really on the daddy theme and the daddy issues and not kind of looking back or looking ahead. But I think by the end of the whole thing, we'll be able to kind of piece it all together, because the very last track of the whole, or the very last chunk of the whole album is a reprise. So it kind of goes back to original themes. And then I think we'll be able to see the whole thing on a much grander scale. But this section is so daddy heavy that I find it hard to talk about a heavy daddy, that I find it hard to talk about much else thematically, but this is a very good chunk for the music section, I think.
There's one more little line that I want to pull out. The last two lines, we have a possible change of topic that I want to pull out. I'll judge you all and make damn sure that no one judges me. This is sort of a fascinating reversal of the biblical injunction to judge not lest ye be judged. Thank you, Tiki. I agree. It's sort of, taking that and flopping it on its head. Rather than judge not lest ye be judged, it's judge hardcore and don't let anyone judge you.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, going from the Anderson kind of critique of the church seems to be like maybe what his experience was of what was practiced.
Yeah. Judge so hard no one dares to judge you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Keep the judgment in your hand and keep yourself above the law.
One judgment in the hand is worth two in the bush.
Absolutely it is.
Yeah. Yeah. And this line kind of ties back. I'm trying to look for where we saw it. Oh yeah, there we go. It's back in the beginning. It's and your wise men don't know how it feels to be thick as a brick. Your wise men are so smart, they're disconnected.
Right.
But the I character, the narrator, is, I may make you feel, but I can't make you think. He's the one who can judge because he has the broadest of views. He can look at the really thick people, and he can look at the really wise people, and he can relate to them both. He can connect to them, both kinds, and therefore he is the one who can judge. Maybe? I don't know.
Maybe.
I'm thinking we're far enough in that we can maybe start kind of trying to put the pieces together and see if there are connections as we're moving along.
Or, Nick, are we looking at something akin to the ages of man? I mean, in the beginning, is it, the boy who is outside of society in a way because he is both more intelligent than the mean, and also he's a kid, and so, that's a special place in society where you are in it but not participating in it. And now we have it come full circle to he's taken the place of his old man, whether he knows how to or wants to or not, and so is in the place of being the judge.
Okay. Yeah.
You're like, okay. Step away, put down the podcast before anyone gets hurt.
I had to process that, but I think that's a good way. We have seen that progression of our narrator, even though we have to think of the narrator as being a 12-year-old boy. Well, it's being written by the 12-year-old boy.
But at the same time, that's also just the conceit, and that's just
right.
Part of the joke that I think the premise is both that yes, it is, and also of course it isn't. So it's the sort of is not.
Yeah.
Is and not is.
I think I need to hang less on the Gerald Bostock conceit and just think of it more as a tongue-in-cheek. Because as much as he says it's being written by a 12-year-old and things like that, everybody knows, including Ian Anderson, everybody knows that it's Ian Anderson who wrote this, and he expects everyone to know and operate under the assumption that the lyrics are coming from Ian Anderson.
Right, except when it's convenient, of course, and to play the joke.
Yeah, it is conveniently layered when it works for the piece.
So, Nick,
Omen.
what are we listening to next week?
Next week is the wrap-up of Side A, actually. So if this were created now, it would be a full, hour and a half album. You know, without a break in there. Sound-wise, there would not be a break.
Okay.
But because of the constraints of the medium at the time, there needed to be a stopping point.
So you could flip the record over.
So you could physically flip the record over, yeah.
Yeah.
So the last about 7 minutes, so that's 10, 15, 16 minutes in, the last about 7 minutes is going to be You Curl Your Toes in Fun, Childhood Heroes, and Stabs Instrumental.
Amazing.
And I think this is going to tie up all of any new themes, any new melodies that we're going to be hearing throughout. And then side B is going to be taking something that has been established previously and twisting it. A lot like John Evans' organ playing that we discussed earlier in the episode we take something that we've heard before and we tweak it a little bit. We twist it, whether it's lyrically or how we sing it or just the instruments being played at the time. We're going to see a lot of that.
A little theme and variation.
Yeah.
The classical roots of some of the musicians are playing.
Yeah, and I genuinely think that it really helps to provide a sense of progression there beyond just like the chugging along and whatnot. I think it really helps to show there's an evolution, that something has happened or is going to happen in this portion.
Right. Well, Nick, until next week, I'm Daddy Omen.
You know what you can do when the old man's gone?
What's that?
You can go to iTunes and give us a review. You can rate us for 5 stars.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whether you're from the upper class or the middle class or the lower class, or you don't pin yourself into a class at all because it's all just a man-made structure, man.
Whoa. Okay.
You can still give us a rating and a review because, unfortunately, iTunes does follow that structure.
Right.
and we are at its mercy.
You may never get approval from your own father, but you can get our approval by giving us a 5-star rating on iTunes.
That's all it takes. Just consider that like bringing home a bunch of O-levels or whatever you wacky Brits do. I'm sure we're going to hear from John on this one.
Yeah.
We'll put your review on our fridge with a little star, 5 little star stickers on it. How's that sound?
That's right. Yeah.
Perfect. So until next week, he is Daddy Omen.
He is Daddy Nick.
Papa Nick, I prefer. We are Feckless Daddies.
And this is Talk Daddy to Me.
Ben, thanks for coming into my office.
Oh, no problem, Jerry. What do you got? You got a new creation?
I've got an idea. It's going to be called
Okay.
The Flavor of the Father. Father's Day's coming up soon.
Oh my
So I want to put this out. What's going to go in it?
I love it.
Like stale coffee is going
Whiskey.
to be the base, right? Oh, a splash of like a whiskey swirl in the middle.
A little taste of the belt.
Yup. Leather. I like that. Leather pieces. Good.
And we'll put right on the front of it. Talk Tull to Me is a proud member of the Feckless Momes audio network.
I just want your acceptance.